Great. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to this webinar in December, moving on towards the festive season. We are joined today by our squirrel officers, Julie Bailey and David Adams, who are being funded through this pilot project by the Forestry Commission. Thank you very much to the Forestry Commission for that funding. This project is looking at expanding grey squirrel management across Yorkshire, Lancashire, and County Durham. They are doing an amazing job at engaging stakeholders. They've already engaged over 1,000 stakeholders, over 400,000 hectares of land in less than a year, which is fantastic. And I know I've heard reports from so many people about how wonderful it is to have UK Squirrel Officers on the ground doing this kind of work. So we will hear from the officers in a minute and their fantastic work they're doing. We will also have a Q&A session afterwards. If you can put your questions, please, in the Q&A function of Zoom and use the chat function for any discussions between yourselves and to say hello and where you're from, that's great. But the question and answer section, just for facility, just helps me keep track of the questions more easily. And so, yeah, and with that said, I will pass over to Julie, who will start us off.
Thank you, Kay. Let me just share screen.
It's the one next to the minus. Yeah.
Yep. Slideshow. Is that okay? Can you all
That's great.
see?
Thanks,
A
Julie.
squirrel in the snow, which is rather apt for this time of year. So, yes, hello everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this webinar. It's so nice to see so many participants, hopefully like-minded participants. As Kay says, this is a Forestry Commission funded programme with a limited timescale. So David and I working together across Yorkshire, Lancashire and County Durham. Won't be discussing specific locations on this webinar, but to say that the project started on the 22nd of January this year. It's due to end on the 31st of March next year. So we haven't got long left, but hopefully we'll see future going forward. Kay's already mentioned some of the aims of the project, one of which is to expand grey squirrel removal and to establish new community groups, provide training and mentoring, and also to offer advice and guidance where needed. I'm sure I don't need to say what we're doing, but I shall. We're raising awareness of the squirrel issues, whether that's food and living space competition, whether that's the cost of grey squirrel bark stripping, or whether we're actually raising awareness on disease management. So including squirrelpox virus disease, including adenovirus, including FAD, and also tick-borne Lyme disease as well. A lot of time David and I are spending with both local and national nature recovery strategies, which we've got all around the UK. They're all in various draft stages at the moment, but certainly the ones I'm involved in locally, I'm pleased to say, very pleased to say, that red squirrels will be a standalone species within these strategies. So an immediate gold ticket for the red squirrel, which is great news. There's going to be lots and lots of different measures within these strategies. So measures for protecting red squirrels, one of which, as you can guess, is obviously the invasive grey squirrel removal. That is a necessary measure at least for protecting red squirrels. We are just over 10 months into the project now. we've been sowing an awful lot of seeds, we've been opening an awful lot of doors, and we have less than 4 months remaining to sow some more and open some more. It certainly doesn't come without challenges, some of which you can see on the screen there, and not in any particular order, but I wanted to mention a few. Time being one, particularly time for red squirrels. You know, how much longer are we going to have red squirrels with current interventions? Secondly, the time we all have as practitioners, helping to protect those red squirrels. Secondly, we have the challenge of negativity. Has to be mentioned. With anything new, there will always be some form of negativity. But generally, we counter that with productivity where possible. Then we have issues around access. This could be difficult terrain, particularly for an old woman like me with a walking stick. Terrain is pretty difficult. But furthermore, in a lot of our woodlands, we have huge public footfall. So we have to be extremely careful and be concerned about every member of the public that are within our areas. Then we have stakeholder engagement. In itself is a challenge because there really is so many people that we have to consider under what I call the 3 C's of communication, collaboration, and consultation. And I apologise to anybody that we have missed in any of those communications. It certainly isn't meant, but there are an awful lot of people to consider. Then I've put inappropriate feeding and biosecurity. I want to give particular mention to inappropriate feeding because certainly in red squirrel areas, I'm finding that there's a lot of encouragement of hand feeding of red squirrels, which is not really helpful. So I did want to mention that. And then lastly on this slide, we have what's currently available. Other than the current methods that we use, there is nothing else. And there's certainly some mixed messaging in the press. And that's not any particular fault of any of the organisations involved in any of this. It is generally inaccuracies within press. So it was definitely a challenge that I thought was worth mentioning. So what have I been up to? The red markers on this map give a general snapshot of where I've been engaging with stakeholders in Yorkshire and Lancashire. Then I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but I'm sure some of you are aware that both David and I are actually teaching. We hold teaching qualifications. So we're out there doing a lot of teaching. Myself personally, I've been involved in the Lantra shooting course for 6 years now, been delivering that programme. It's become a very popular course. Over on the right there, you can see this is the training uptake spread just this year between March and October on that particular course. So a good spread of people getting involved there. This one here is a combination of both the engagement and the training. And again, it's just a snapshot. And it certainly hasn't been a case of one size fits all in the general messaging. It certainly hasn't been. We have areas which are red squirrel only, areas which are grey only, and indeed areas where we have both species. What I can say is where there's been no management of squirrels, it wouldn't be unusual to pick up squirrels like this one on the right hand side of your screen at the moment, who we call Godzilla. He actually weighed in at over 800 grams, so quite a large squirrel. What I do need to point out is when I'm out there delivering awareness raising, I'm very selective in that I treat each area uniquely. So it's actually, what does that particular area need? What are the unique points that that area needs? As I've mentioned, we can have red areas, grey areas, or the interface areas. Pleased to say we've got some official new groups, and this is just my patch. So we have the Yorkshire Dales Red Squirrel Alliance, we have the Bowland, which is in Lancashire, and then over in the west, we have West Yorkshire. These are all groups that are now official, with really good governance in place, which is key. They each have a constitution. Through the project, we have put 10 million public liability insurance policies in place, which covers any activity by the operatives within those group areas. We've also got bank accounts being set up and a lot of governance policy and documentation within the briefcases as to how the group is run. This can include things like, safeguarding adults policy, GDPR, general protocols for grey squirrel management, etc., etc. There's such a lot in that briefcase. On top of that, through the project, we've been given a substantial budget for equipment. And I do apologise, my husband's just walked in. He'll be gone in a second if anybody can actually see him there. So with the project budget, we've managed to give out a lot of equipment to the groups, and I'm also pleased to say that that equipment will remain with those groups beyond the lifetime of the project. So that means we've got some help with sustainability for those groups. We do need a lot more help, as I've mentioned before. We've still got some doors to open and some more seeds to sow, but opportunities are currently for people who would be kind enough to distribute and hold equipment for us, distribute leaflets to members of the public or to venues. We're looking for sponsors to enable us to host more events and give more talks. We're also looking for residents to get involved in our equipment loan schemes, landowners to provide access to our trained operatives, and then obviously eyes and ears of anybody out there who sees squirrels to please report them in to their local group or the nearest local group to them. From the point of view of stakeholder support for myself, David, and the project in general, we have lots. I have 3 quotes here, which I won't read out because I'm aware of time, and we have David and Q&As to come. But we have one from Yorkshire Wildlife Trust there. We have another from Yorkshire Dales National Park, and another from the wonderful Ellie from the Howardian Hills National Landscape. And it's fabulous to get so much support in so little time that this project's been going. So thank you so much to anybody and everybody who is supportive of our work. Now, this is my last slide, and I'm taking off my UKSA hat for this one and putting on my Chair of Northern Red Squirrels Cumbria hat. And I want to give NRS Cumbria and NRS Northumberland a particular mention. because if the new groups in Durham, Lancashire and Yorkshire could emulate just a fraction of what Cumbria and Northumberland groups currently do, it would be phenomenal, because without that, we won't have red squirrels. And one thing that I'm looking towards the future is if these official new groups could at some point be considered for NRS membership, that would give us 3 new county branches of the organisation, which would be absolutely fabulous. So thank you, everybody.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Julie, and definitely something to consider. And thank you very much for setting those up and all the hard work you do. David, over to you.
I've gone too far, but never mind. So I think probably most people know Julie very, very well. Julie's been interested, and if I even whispered, obsessed about squirrels for a long, long time. I'm relatively new to the squirrel world. I'm originally a trained arboriculturalist, so I've always had a deep interest in trees, including pests and diseases. I was previously a volunteer with the Cramlington District Group when I lived closer to where they operate. I used to teach countryside management to FE students, and I introduced quite a few young people to the idea of the hard cutting edge of conservation, where sometimes it's not all about doing those surveys and all the nice things, but there's certainly a hard edge at times to countryside management. And I'm already a local volunteer in the new area that I live, just up in the North Pennines. As you might be able to tell, I'm from Northumberland. I've got a slight Northumberland stroke Newcastle accent. I've also taught a range of students with learning difficulties and disabilities. And just out of interest, I'm a forest school trained and bushcraft instructor. And I've got a deep interest in deer and deer management. So that's kind of a brief overview of myself and where I'm at. Julie mentioned public engagement. This is just a list of some of the places that I've given talks and tried to share the message of red squirrel conservation and grey squirrel management. And it's been widespread. It's been WI meetings, it's been local wildlife groups, it's been in areas where perhaps some of our ideas aren't shared widely, i.e. the British Deer Society and our local branch, but where it's been well received. And as I say, that's just a list of some of the places that I've visited. The shows in particular are quite profitable. I think we get a good footfall of people at agricultural shows. And to be honest, I don't think we had anybody that was against the whole idea of what we're trying to promote, which was quite heartening. So these are some of the public engagement events. This is where we've had some of the volunteer groups getting involved. And as you can see, we've had a new group development in the Weardale area. If people are familiar with that, it's part of the uplands of the North Pennines. And like many of our squirrel populations, the red squirrels have been forced into these corners and areas where they're surviving, but perhaps not thriving, and they're going to need a lot of help from ourselves. This is the logo that the Weardale group now use. As Julie said, we have constitutions, we have documentation, we have everything ready for a group to go, including insurance. It's something that Julie from day one's been quite on board with and has all that documentation ready. So that's been a godsend from my point of view, who doesn't really like paperwork, to be honest. Again, this is the area up in the North Pennines there. And it was an area that I first identified because I'd heard that there were still red squirrels in this area. As it happened, a lady from the upper part of the valley came to one of the meetings, and we started that conversation. She was desperate to try and get on board and get something done with her local red squirrels, but didn't really know where to start. So we had that conversation, we had public meetings, we invited people along. Some of them were well attended, others weren't as well attended. And as I say, we did some of the local agricultural shows, Stanhope, Walsingham, St. John's Chapel, etc. And that brought in a lot of interest. And it's surprising how many people that lived in the area didn't know there were still red squirrels further up the valley. In fact, many of the older people that I spoke to further down the valley around the Stanhope area, they said they hadn't seen any or knew of any squirrels in perhaps 10 to 15 years, which was understandable. We've been working with schools with that same group. We've been visiting schools. We've been putting up cameras and feed boxes and trying to get the children interested. And it's amazing how knowledgeable the children were. We had some interesting answers when we were talking about predators, and people were talking about wolves and baboons and things like that. But we had the majority of the school children were really on board with what we were trying to do and understood that red squirrels and grey squirrels couldn't mix. And they used terms like the squirrel pox virus, etc. So that was heartening to see some of these really young children starting to get a grip with some of the problems that we have. One of the people that came out of the woodwork, a couple, owned a small woodland, and they were very interested in whether or not they had squirrels in their woodland. So after visiting the site and going to have a visit, we could see, I found evidence of squirrels there. What type of squirrels they were, I had no idea. So as I suggested, we put up some boxes and cameras, and for a week or two, they monitored what was going on in their woodland. And unfortunately and understandably, they found they had grey squirrels in the woodland. And this wasn't very far from the known red populations. So as time went on, they kept the cameras up, and this little chap appeared. And so they're on the edge of this red-grey area. After a little bit of chatting and discussion about what they wanted to do next, they decided they'd like some trap training. So I went up, did some trap training, and I'm pleased to say that they've started a control program in the woodland. It was amazing how quickly they were starting to trap grey squirrels. I haven't trapped any red ones yet, but they're trapping grey squirrels, which can only be good. What we need to do is to find lots of other people like that within that whole catchment area who can do exactly the same. And I think, as Julie mentioned, we've been out there, we've been trying to sow seeds, and in this case, something started to grow. I'm hopeful that this group will continue to work long after this project's finished, because they have got a viable, although very small and widespread population. I've been involved with Durham's local nature recovery strategy, and after an initial start where we weren't quite sure if red squirrels were going to make it, I think, looking at the draft, that we've managed to get red squirrels on that list. And we're hoping to identify populations still in Durham. And I'm still getting messages and anecdotal reports of red squirrels in the area, in Durham itself. There's certain places where 2 or 3 reports come in regularly. So those are areas that we're going to try and find out what's going on and whether or not there are still reds about. As you know, it can be quite difficult at times, and perhaps photographic evidence and video evidence is the way we need to go forward. They're interested in creating buffer zones around the populations that we have identified, and they've said that they're going to support red squirrel conservation. and look at the connective habitat and see if we can't get some more planting done. So in their nature recovery strategy, they've identified that there is a need to help out the reds they've got. There's very small but dynamic groups that are possibly tucked away in all kinds of places. I think a lot of what I've realised is until you start looking and asking people, you sometimes don't get a full picture of what's going on. Along the way, there's been several publications that I've used, and I would recommend anybody that hasn't done so far to have a read of The Cull of the Wild. It's an interesting perspective. I think sometimes we can get a little bit narrow-minded in our approach and only see it from our point of view, but that certainly opened up my eyes to how other people see what we do. And it's certainly something that would give weight behind the argument of killing animals in the name of conservation and the reasons we do it. Other books I've found quite useful are the Grey Squirrel Management Handbook and obviously the Controlling Grey Squirrels in Woodlands Forestry Commission publication. There's lots and lots of information out there, but certainly Cull of the Wild is something that I would recommend to people if they haven't already read it. So what I have found is that there's a real need for grey control. Up here in Northumberland, I've never witnessed damage on the level that I've seen further down south. And I say down south, I'm talking about Yorkshire and places like that. Julie and I visited a woodland in Helmsley, and it was amazing the amount of damage that was being carried out by grey squirrels and deer to an extent in a publicly accessible woodland. In fact, so much so that I'd say that the gentleman that was managing that woodland didn't really have a good idea of how he was going to take protection of that woodland forward. It had high footfall, but the damage was quite immense, and it was something that I hadn't seen before. We really need to try and find out how we can change public perceptions, and it's going to be through projects like this and groups like the ones in Cumbria, Northumberland, Wales, Scotland, all these other groups. We really need to start working hard at trying to change that perception that grey squirrels are nice, cuddly, touchy, all those things about grey squirrels. We need to try and change that message that although they are an interesting and maybe the only squirrels you see in your woodland, they do have a downside to them being there. And we'll have to be brave about explaining that and how we get that across to the public. And we certainly need to champion our volunteer groups. I know they get a lot of praise, but we really need to big them up for what they do. Without the groups in Cumbria and Northumberland, there wouldn't be any red squirrels left. So that's me. I think we're for about 30 minutes there. I think we're going to be opening up the floor to some questions.
Great, thanks very much, David. And you're also doing an excellent job, and especially in County Durham and East Yorkshire. Thank you very much. There are some questions that are coming up. One of the questions is, do any of the groups have paid membership?
It was suggested that one of the groups that was set up in Weardale, you paid £1 to be a member, but that would be as far as I would have thought. I'm not sure what Julie's take is on membership for groups, etc.
I'm very much on the fence about membership, to be honest, as in paid subscribing members, because we don't know what's happening with the project, and as yet we're still at foundation stages. So at the moment, in leaflets and things, we haven't got a subscribing membership program.
Yeah. I think that's good. The volunteer groups, the volunteers give a lot of their time and a lot of their energy already, and spend a lot of money doing things, don't they? So on the work that they do. So I think which is very, 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 very valuable. Um, there's a question around more detail about the squirrel diseases. Which one was afflicting the red squirrel pictured early on? I don't think the range of diseases and their effects is well understood. In the southern context, I know of an animal lover who enjoys taking squirrel food for the greys when they go for a walk in certain woods.
So the picture that was on my presentation was a diseased squirrel with squirrel pox virus disease caused by the greys. And we used some of those rather graphic photographs of squirrel pox virus disease in education and awareness programs, because obviously if we talk about adenovirus, which is generally asymptomatic, we can't demonstrate it or give it the same impact as we do with the graphic images of the squirrel pox disease.
But there are several viruses that are quite easily transmitted, aren't they? Yeah, yeah. Just to follow up on the membership question, in the Five Red Squirrel group, they charge £5 per member, which covers their insurance. So that helps cover the costs of the group, which is really useful to help cover the costs of the group. Thank you. Is support still available for parts of North Yorkshire that haven't been involved, and how do we access it? Um,
Yes,
yeah.
I'm more than happy to speak to people in North Yorkshire. I was down not far from Beverley on an MOD site this week, just giving advice, etc. So yeah, happy to speak to anybody in North Yorkshire. Julie and I have kind of divided it. She's in the west, I'm in the east. It could depend on where it falls. I'm sure one of us could pick that up.
Yeah, definitely. If anybody wants to contact the Squirrel Officers, it is Squirrel Officers at squirrelaccord.uk. So Squirrel Officers at squirrelaccord.uk, and that will go to both Julie and David, and they can decide who is the best person to take that forward. Thank you very much, and any engagement and is greatly appreciated. And yes, that also points out that there's lots of damage from grey squirrels this year. There is a lot of damage and a lot of reports of damage coming in from grey squirrel damage this year. This has been a particularly bad year for damage, and that would be really useful for us to sit down next year and to try and quantify that and to try and evaluate that, and to look at that, because I think it's a really important story that we keep needing to spread. That the grey squirrels are both an issue for red squirrels and our trees, and we need healthy woodland ecosystems to move into the future. Next question: where have pine martens been introduced as natural predators? Is this a general question for Yorkshire, Lancashire, and County Durham, or are there any releases in Yorkshire, Lancashire, and County Durham?
Not as yet, but I think certainly some of the wildlife trusts are interested in that aspect of conservation. I know Julie has her own ideas about fragile populations and where pine martens are, but they're certainly moving down through into Northumberland and will be with most places, I would have thought, in Northumberland in the next few years. And certainly that would then lend itself, if they can get through the Northumberland countryside into the Durham countryside. And if the populations in Cumbria and Northumberland, etc., all meet up, then yeah, I think I don't know of any ones that have released. Obviously, there's been a release in Cumbria that we've all heard about, but not in Durham stroke Northumberland. They're all
No,
in Northumberland.
no, and there's been those in the Forest of Dean
Yeah.
in North Wales.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but not in the areas that we're talking about at the moment. Great work. I haven't heard Formby mentioned, and the maps didn't include Formby in the Sefton Coast. is it included in this project? There's already work going on there. So there is all this project was to expand on the work, not to take over, but to expand on the work that's already being done. So there's a lot of work that's already being, there is some work that's already being done in those counties. And so what we wanted to do is expand on that work and to help try and buffer Cumbria or Northumberland from the movement of greys up into those areas and to allow reds to come back down into northern south to more areas of northern England, and to protect the trees, essentially to protect the trees, lots of the trees that are being planted, lots of the woodland creation and the trees that are being planted in those areas. There are huge, huge tree planting targets that we've got in this country. And those are key counties to plant trees, but we will not see those trees survive into the future unless we manage our grey squirrel population.
That's something I find quite a lot here. I was tree planting this weekend and spoke to the landowner about what grey squirrel management they plan for the future, and it was something that hadn't really occurred to them. They understand the deer issue, hence them putting tree guards and things like that, but they don't understand potentially that, you know, in the next 10 to 15 years, they're going to be ideal targets for greys.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the work of the deer officers has been really important in getting that message out, and the deer work that's gone on. So what we need to do is galvanise the work around the squirrels. So we were protecting our trees from both deer and squirrels at the same time. And ensuring that those trees grow into the mature, healthy woodlands that we need for the future, which are both economically and ecologically important. As part of your project, are you collaborating with the schools, local authorities, and wildlife organisations to produce wider public outreach to educate people on red squirrel ecology and conservation?
Sorry, as you can see from my little presentation, we're working with the local primary schools in the area. I know that Kay has mentioned she's very keen to get some resources set up for schools, for some of for the children there as well. But yeah, very much so. As far as the local authorities go, we're hoping to push through our red squirrel interests in the local nature recovery strategies. I know Julie's been working very hard on that as well in some of her areas. So I'd say we're trying our best.
Yeah, definitely engaging with the local nature recovery strategies, and then hopefully if the Red Squirrel Recovery Network bid goes in, there is funding within that for us, for the UK Squirrel Corps to work with the University of York to develop a package of education resources for secondary schools to engage young people and inspire them into what future science and conservation careers they could get into, but also to raise awareness of the issues around invasive species, using grey squirrels as a focus, and the importance of endangered species management, and then using red squirrels as a focus, and then the importance of protecting our trees and our woodland and habitats, and combining that with the importance for all of the ecosystem service benefits that they provide to humans. So yes, that is definitely something we are focusing on and will work on in the future. And Julie, you've been working with young people as well, haven't you?
Yes, absolutely. We're also looking at the moment at a programme for the children that are involved in Duke of Edinburgh Awards. So giving them, you know, the week's work of works experience in volunteer roles. Obviously, we need to be aware of obviously the safeguarding policies that we've got in place for adults and kids, and obviously enhanced police checks and things like that are going to happen before we can take those children out and give them a week's work of works experience.
Yeah, thank you. Do you address damage to property when you talk to the volunteers and general public? So that's grey squirrel damage to their houses and buildings and.
I certainly do, and I'm sure Julie does the same. I usually have a few slides in showing squirrels popping their heads out of loft type areas and things like that. And mention the damage that gets done in gardens. We've talked to lots of people over the last year, and the amount of people that come forward and say they haven't had any fruit on their trees, they haven't had any nuts in the garden, the bulbs are getting dug up. Some people are having a bit of a hard time with greys. As I say, up in Northumberland, because of the good work that's going on, it's not as noticeable, but as soon as you start going into some of these areas in Durham, in Yorkshire, then the damage can be significant.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. There's a question around the guidance around trees being attacked from 10 years old. That was the figures in the guidance that was produced at the time. There are being reports now of younger and younger trees being attacked from around 7 years old. So maybe that is something we need to look at and reassess the age of the different types of species of tree that are being attacked. But yes, there are various reports of trees being attacked under 10 years old, which is even more concerning because you've got even less time then to put in a grey squirrel management plan in place. Let's have a look. Okay. I think that's all the questions. And I don't know whether either of you want to just have any final thoughts about from yourselves. I just want to say a huge thank you to, oh, go on, Julie, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say a huge thank you across the board to anyone that's been involved in this project since the end of Jan. And I look forward to working with them all again soon and working with new people and still trying to get to grips with the different geography, which has been very interesting along the way. But yeah, thank you to everybody, and keep supporting red squirrel conservation.
Yeah, and tree protection. Yeah. Anything from you, David?
Just again, thanks to everybody that's taken part so far. We've still got another 4 months, so if you are interested in getting in touch, please do, and we'll see what we can do. A lot of these seeds that were being sown, hopefully they may come about later on and start to grow. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, we've got 4 months to go, so please get in touch.
We've got 4 months to go with this pilot project, and we have put in a proposal to extend the life of this project. So I am praying and hoping that this wonderful project does get extended, because I think it would be wonderful to galvanise, to build on the work that has already taken place, the fantastic work that Julie and David has already put in place, and all of the amazing stakeholders that have been involved across Yorkshire, across Lancashire, and across County Durham. And if we can build on the amazing progress that's been made so far, then who knows what we could do in the future. So thank you so much, Julie and David. It is fantastic to work with you. Thanks again so much to the Forestry Commission for funding this. It has been a really fantastic project. And thank you to you all for joining us. A recording of this will be made available on the UK Squirrel Accord website. And if you want to get involved in the project, please do email squirrelofficers@squirrelaccord.uk. Thanks very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.